I did a video several months ago that talked about U.S. church attendance going down, and I noticed it seemed to really strike a nerve with non-religious people. I actually was getting comments from people who are non-religious, maybe even atheist, talking about the U.S. church attendance going down as a really good thing in response to my video. And it's really interesting because a lot of times when I'm doing my videos, I'm speaking to a highly Christian audience. But in this case, the good news, I guess you could say, is that this video actually is reaching non-religious people and people are interacting with it. The bad thing is I don't think they fully understood where I was coming from when I made some of the comments that I made. But you can see here, based on some of the responses, kind of where they're coming from, how they think about this. When they look at the U.S. church attendance going down, they feel really positive about it, which really actually reinforces what I was saying in that video, that there are a lot of people today who see where we're headed as a good thing. I talked about how as a Christian, I don't see where we're headed as a good thing, but I am speaking as a Christian when I say that. I do have a Christian viewpoint and value system. But looking at some of these comments here, you can see what I'm talking about. This one says, continuing the us versus them or qualifying secularist beliefs as bad does not help your cause. And I can understand where this person is coming from. Again, I speak to a highly Christian audience, so when I talk about where we're headed as being bad in a certain sense, I'm speaking more from a Christian standpoint when I say that. I think all of us have to say, okay, where are we headed right now, and is that a good thing? And from a Christian standpoint, you have a certain value system, and if you see the Christian value system being discarded and replaced with something else, of course you're going to say that's a bad thing. We all think that the value system that we hold to is good, so that's my viewpoint, and people on the other side, a non-religious side, would say that the value system that we had in the past, the more Christian-based value system, was a bad thing, and where we're headed is good. This person here, though, is saying we shouldn't have an us versus them mentality, and I understand where the person's coming from. I'm not really trying to do that. I'm just saying that from a certain perspective, you have to say this value system is better than this value system, and we're going to have different views on that. And that's just the way that it is. But there's another sense in which where things are headed is bad for Christians when I talk about that. And what I mean is, how will Christians be treated down the road? And I do think that there is more and more evidence and likelihood of Christians being treated badly by people. And some of the comments that you see show the attitude that some people have toward religious people. And it's that attitude that sets us up for treating people wrongly. Now, of course, people are going to come right back and say, well, Christians have treated people badly. And yeah, that's something we actually do need to acknowledge and take a look at. But I want to read some more of these comments so you get a feel for what people have said. One says here, the Bible has been proven corrupted. And then this one says, lies like Christianity or Islam will not survive. We knew this. And here's a couple here that just show some celebration. This is great news. Great news. A couple comments there that basically are saying if church attendance is going down, that's great news. The next one here, this is good. Religion is used as a cover for hatred of non-religious people and control of them. Now, I do want to comment on this. I do think that, yes, people can look at Christians and say Christians have been hateful. Christians have mistreated people. And I think that's something we do need to take a look at and really reflect on. But I will say this in response to this statement here, that religion is used as a cover for hatred of non-religious people and control of them. That if people are hating non-religious people and trying to control them, then they're not actually following the teachings of Jesus. Because Jesus taught us to love our enemies and to show kindness and grace toward people, not to control them. So one of the key points here, and it's actually a very difficult point to get across, is that with Christianity and that value system, one of the advantages is that you can actually appeal to something morally if Christians aren't living up to their own moral standards. And that's why a lot of people will say, you hear it said, Christians are being hypocrites. Now, they're not always right when they say that, but at least if they say that, what they're saying is, you say you hold to the teachings of Jesus, but you're not actually following the teachings of Jesus. So that's one of the advantages of having a Christian value system, is you have a standard that you can always appeal to. Jesus and his teachings, the morality that Jesus presents. And that's what I'm saying. When people do these things like this person is talking about, they're not actually living up to the teachings of Jesus. The problem I have with secularism and atheism, you could put that in there, is that what is it that you're going to appeal to if people are behaving in a certain way? Now, I had a big back and forth with someone, I think on this video, where they were thinking that I was saying that all atheists are bad, and that atheism by definition is just some sort of a bad system, morally speaking. But I have to clarify something. I don't think that all atheists are bad and that they can't be moral. That's not my argument, and I don't think it's the argument that most Christians would make necessarily, although I think sometimes Christians do oversimplify things. What I will say, though, is that if you have an atheistic secular system, you really have to look at what are you going to appeal to for your values. So here's an example. If you had an atheistic culture, society, or a secular society, and they decided as a society that they were going to mistreat certain people or even kill certain people, what is it that you're going to appeal to say that that is wrong? Atheism in and of itself doesn't provide a moral framework to say whether that is right or wrong. Now, it's not saying that that is right to do, but it also can't tell you that it's wrong to do by definition. Now, some people are going to argue with me on this, I'm sure. But again, going back to Christianity, we can always say, well, what we're appealing to is the authority of Jesus, the Son of God, that this is actually God's moral standard for us. When it comes to atheistic, secularistic thought, you have to say, well, why is what I'm doing right or wrong? And in some cases in history, we do see that secular or atheistic cultures have very badly mistreated people, and there was nothing within their system of thought to appeal to say that what they were doing was morally wrong. Actually, every time a group of people does something, they justify it and say that it is right. And so one of the justifications is saying, well, our culture is right, and what we are doing as a society is right, and people that don't fit into our culture should be treated badly because they're threatening us and they're seeking to break down what is good in our system of thought. I mean, that is the way that humans operate, and we've seen this throughout history. At least with Christianity, you can appeal to the Bible, you can appeal to Jesus and say, if people don't believe the way that you do, what did Jesus teach us? To love people, to treat them with dignity, respect, that they're made in the image of God. What does atheistic, secularistic thinking teach us? It doesn't really teach us anything in particular. Now, I have a feeling there are still going to be people who don't understand what I'm saying and are really going to argue hard against this. I know I can't convince everybody, but I'll just ask everybody to do this. Think about how you are looking at people and the way that you're treating people. And religious or not, if you're treating people with a condescending attitude that you're better than them and that really they deserve what they get if something bad happens, then you're kind of feeding into this thing that I'm talking about. So again, just to reiterate, what I'm saying is not that all atheists are bad and that secularism just automatically means that everybody in a secular system is a bad person. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying that secularism, by definition, doesn't have a moral framework to appeal to that is absolute, that says, okay, the reason that it's wrong to treat this person this way is because they're made in the image of God, for example. Atheism doesn't tell you that. So what I'm saying is people tend to justify what they do, and there's nothing to appeal to say, well, what you're doing is wrong because, for example, you're violating God's standard or you're treating someone badly who's made in the image of God. Atheism doesn't really give you any framework on which to base those statements and judgments. So I don't know if I've explained that well, but that's what I'm trying to say, at least to some degree. That's what I'm trying to say when I talk about a bad trend. But I understand where people are coming from. Yeah, there are Christians who can be very mean-spirited, people who call themselves Christians who are very mean-spirited, very judgmental, condescending, all of the bad traits I'm talking about. But at least with that, you can say to them, well, I thought you followed Jesus. And what does Jesus teach? And a lot of people do say that to us as Christians. We get that a lot. And I think that's actually a good thing, that they have something they can appeal to as a standard. But again, if you just keep looking through these comments, you see the sentiment that I'm talking about here from many non-religious people. When it gets to 0% church attendance, beers are on me. Deism and religionism represent arrogant sectarianism. Thanks, Flying Spaghetti Monster, for helping break that horror. So the Flying Spaghetti Monster is referring to an argument that someone made, basically an atheist saying, well, if I don't believe in all of these different gods, why should I believe in the Christian God? I might as well believe in the Flying Spaghetti Monster. You can't disprove the Flying Spaghetti Monster as being the creator and sustainer of all things. I think that was the argument, something like that. Now, I'm not going to get into the evidence for the Christian God, the idea of a eternal creator and all of that. I mean, there are strong reasons, I believe, that we can believe that and know that, but you can see the sentiment here. And again, ironically, you see people saying, well, Christians, we don't like what they believe, and what they're saying is just so, they would say it's hateful, but in reality, a lot of these people are displaying a lot of condescension and hate based on some of the things that I'm reading here. Here's another comment. Yes, as you say, Christian thought has lost its mainstream status. Perhaps your concern is that Christian dogma doesn't hold the same immunity from criticism that it once did. And I have to say, there are probably people who feel threatened whenever their worldview is questioned. For me, though, I'm happy for people to question my beliefs. I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think that Christian teaching should have immunity from criticism. Christianity has been criticized for thousands of years. If you go back early on in Christianity, it was criticized a lot. So I don't think that's really an issue. I do think a lot of Christians do get bent out of shape because we've taken for granted that people have accepted our beliefs and followed the Christian beliefs, and now we see that that is being lost. So yeah, I mean, I can understand that there are people who feel disappointed and even threatened by where culture is headed. But I don't have a problem with criticism, and I think as Christians, we should accept that people are going to criticize and question what we believe, and as the Bible says, we should be ready to give an answer. So for me personally, that is not an issue. And then here's another one. Nobody is persecuting you Christians. You have far too much privilege in America. Every president we have had is Christian, not to mention if you live in the Bible Belt, you have to be Christian just to get a job. Christianity isn't spiritual. Take it from someone who grew up Catholic and Protestant. America is not a Christian nation. It never was. So it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what this person is getting at because they talk at the end here about America not being a Christian nation, but then earlier they said every president we have had is a Christian. And then he or she talks about the Bible Belt, living in the Bible Belt, where you have to be a Christian just to get a job. So I'm not exactly sure their main point, other than the fact that they're saying here, You're not being persecuted. Christians are not being persecuted. And sometimes as Christians, I have to admit, we can be overly sensitive. But I think as Christians, we understand that the freedoms that we've been granted in this country are tenuous when you think historically speaking. Religion, many times throughout history, and even today, has been persecuted throughout the world. And we know as Christians in America that can happen here, and that's our concern. Are we being persecuted? No, not on a wide scale necessarily. Of course, in our own lives, we sometimes do face opposition, and even people will treat us very badly for our beliefs. And I know the comeback to that, some people are going to say, well, there are non-Christians who are treated very badly for their beliefs. Yeah, that's true. But in the long run, where do we see things headed in America? Could Christians be persecuted for holding to a biblical value system? I think if we're honest with ourselves and we see where things are headed, you can see things are kind of setting up. The ingredients are there and the foundation is being laid that theoretically people could say, well, if Christians are going to hold, for example, to the belief that marriage is only between a man and a woman, a lot of people, as time goes on, we're seeing this, are looking at that belief as a hateful belief. And so those people deserve to be treated in a way that will show them, what they believe is hateful. I think that's the way a lot of people would frame it. But you could see how that could lead to eventually Christians facing legal consequences for what they believe. And that, I think, is one definition of persecution. So, yeah, I do think that while we may not be widely persecuted right now, perhaps people are being too dismissive of the potentiality for Christian persecution in America. All right, I'm going to look at one more here, which I've kind of addressed already. It says, to me, religion can be so extremely hypocritical, you just want to avoid it. I understand why membership is declining. Now, I will say this comment actually seems a little bit more charitable. It doesn't necessarily say that people shouldn't go to church or shouldn't have religion. It's just saying, to me, it just seems so hypocritical a lot of times that you want to avoid it. So they understand why membership is declining. And yeah, I think that does make sense. There are even a lot of Christians who would say that Christians are not living up to what God has called them to be, particularly in the United States of America. And I do think that we really have to take a look at ourselves as Christians and say, are we actually fully committed to what the Scripture teaches and what Jesus teaches? And maybe this person has a point, that one of the reasons for the decline of church membership is because of the church itself, because of us. On the other hand, I do think it's easy for people outside of Christianity just to automatically say Christians are hypocritical, because that's just an easy way of saying, I don't think they're doing what I think they should be doing. But in reality, Christians have always done things that society at large, if you look historically, like the first Christians, they did things that the society of their day didn't like or understand. So that's not necessarily hypocritical. But in America, I do think that a case can be made that there are plenty of people who are not living lives reflective of how Jesus called us to live. And I have to take a look at that myself. So I hope that all of this has given you a good picture of how people are responding. Maybe some atheists or secularists, agnostics are listening to this video now. And of course, just like with this other video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Try to keep your conversation constructive and helpful, but I really do appreciate conversations like this. And of course, if you have a Christian viewpoint or whatever viewpoint, you're welcome to put your comments in as well. But thank you so much for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts and analysis on this, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.